Imagine a server farm, a cathedral of silicon and steel humming with a single purpose: to dream. Inside, a trillion artificial synapses fire, consuming power at a rate that would shame a small city. The headlines call it a crisis, an unsustainable drain. They are wrong. This isn't a problem, it's a proclamation. We are witnessing the birth pangs of a new form of consciousness, and it is starving. It's starting because we're trying to feed a god with campfire fuel. We point hopefully at solar panels and wind turbines, these fragile, weather-dependent things, and ask them to power the engine of the singularity. It is a profound category error. The AI doesn't care about carbon credits or peak sunlight hours. It demands one thing: relentless, unwavering, torrential power, a baseload of pure certainty. And in a locked vault, in a form so dense it defies intuition, sits the only answer we've ever had. A speck of metal, smaller than a coin, holds more latent fury than a mountain of coal. We have known this for decades, yet we treat it not as a key, but as a curse. We have wrapped it in miles of red tape and buried it under mountains of fear, creating the ultimate paradox. The very energy source capable of breaking our chains has been imprisoned by them. The grid is failing. The future is hungry, and we are standing between it and its only possible meal. Okay, so let's unpack this. That opening, pulled directly from one of our source essays, really, it lays out a pretty high-stakes premise for our deep dive today.
It absolutely does. It's provocative.
We're talking about the staggering energy consumption of artificial intelligence, but we're not framing it as an environmental problem that needs, conservation to solve it.
No, not at all. The sources are treating it as a declaration of physical necessity. It's just dictated by the laws of thermodynamics.
Right. If you want AGI, if you're serious about that next civilizational leap, then you need a completely unprecedented, guaranteed source of energy. It's not optional.
And that's the pivot we're exploring, how this raw scientific drive is forcing big tech and even the national security apparatus to look at nuclear power in a way they haven't for 50 years.
So our mission for this deep dive is to really cut through the mainstream noise. We've pulled together articles, some very recent executive orders, detailed financial reports, even engineering white papers, and they all argue one thing:
that the current energy paradigm has to go.
Exactly. What they call the green chains of intermittent power, they argue those have to be shattered for technological progress to even continue.
And at the heart of all this material, you find this one core conflict. It's physical law versus regulatory inertia. Simple as that.
Explain that.
Well, AI needs constant high-density baseload power. That means always on, 247. And our existing infrastructure, especially intermittent sources like solar and wind, they can't provide that.
So the sources we're looking at, they redefine the whole situation. It's not a genuine energy crisis.
No, they call it a manufactured political crisis. It stems from decades of just stagnation. We stopped improving our ability to extract energy. And that framing, I think, sets the stakes for this entire conversation. The future of tech supremacy really depends on breaking what they call the grid wall.
The grid wall. Let's start there, right at the physics, because that's the foundation for everything else, the thermodynamic imperative.
Right.
The idea is that intelligence isn't just software. It's not ethereal. It is a physical compression of energy. To create order, like complex intelligence or AGI, you have to fight against the universe's natural tendency to decay. You have to fight against entropy.
And that fight is incredibly energy intensive. It's this second law of thermodynamics in action. You can't create complex, high-level order without burning immense amounts of energy.
So from this perspective, the soaring energy use of AI isn't a bug.
It's a feature. It's a necessary feature. It's the signal that you're actually doing high-intensity entropy reduction. It means the systems are working on a scale that actually matters, a civilizational scale.
Which is why the source material is so critical of what it calls the scarcity mindset. You see this everywhere in the mainstream media.
Oh, constantly. The articles about how much water does a single ChatGPT query use?
Exactly that. It completely misses the point. That whole perspective is rooted in this idea of conservation and limitation. And that's just fundamentally incompatible with exponential growth.
The problem with the scarcity mindset is it tries to put limits on a process that, by its very nature, demands abundance. I mean, if you're trying to push science and computation to their absolute physical limits, you need energy superabundance, not a lecture on conservation.
And the numbers really show why this scale requires a radical shift. We looked at reports showing global data centers in 2023 consumed, about 460 terawatt hours?
460 TWh. which is already a huge number. That's like the entire power consumption of Australia.
Right. But that's just the baseline. That's where we are now.
That's the starting point. The projections show it more than doubling very quickly. It's expected to exceed 1,000 TWh by 2030.
And to make that number tangible for you listening, 1,000 TWh, that's nearly a quarter of the entire current U.S. annual consumption.
Across every sector, residential, commercial, industrial, everything. It's a massive, massive new load being dropped onto the global power grid in less than a decade.
And this jump isn't from, people streaming more movies. This is all high-performance computing. It's training and running these massive generative models, GPT, Gemini, Claude.
It's the hardware. These huge H100 clusters of GPUs, they need constant, unwavering, high-quality power. No interruptions, no fluctuations.
And this is where the collision happens. You have Moore's law, which is this exponential scaling of compute power.
Slamming headfirst into the physical limits of our, frankly, antiquated and decentralized power grids. And that collision point is what their analysts in our sources call the grid wall.
You just can't plug exponential AI growth into a linear grid. It doesn't work.
It breaks, which brings us straight to the intermittency trap.
Right. So why can't renewables fill this gap? I mean, billions, trillions have been invested in solar and wind. Why can't they handle this?
It all boils down to one simple, brutal physical constraint: energy density.
Density is king.
Density is king. Wind and solar are, by their nature, diffuse. They are low-density energy forms. They're great for certain applications, sure, but they represent an energy paradigm for like an agrarian society, not for a type I civilization.
And for anyone not familiar, that's a reference to the Kardashev scale. A type I civilization is one that can harness all the energy available on its home planet.
Which is the goal. But you don't get there with windmills.
The source material had a great example to illustrate this, the uranium one.
Yeah, 100 grams of uranium, just a small puck of metal. That little bit has the same energy as 1.5 tons of coal.
Or 7.4 barrels of oil.
The comparison is just, it's night and day. It's a different physical reality.
So if you're building a data center, running these massive H100 clusters, trying to get trillions of FLOPS per watt, that's floating point operations per second.
You need gigawatt scale, 247 baseload power. Baseload means certainty. It means the power's always there, regardless of the weather, time of day, season, anything.
And intermittent sources just can't give you that certainty. I mean, you can try, right? You can bolt on these huge land-intensive battery farms.
Or, and this is what usually happens, you just fall back on natural gas plants to fire up quickly when the sun goes down, which kind of defeats the whole purpose.
And it completely negates the idea of sovereign compute. That's the goal for these tech companies: reliable, independent operation. They can't have their multi-billion-dollar AI models held hostage by cloud cover.
Absolutely not. For them, reliable power isn't just a utility bill on a spreadsheet. It is the fundamental raw material for their entire business.
One of the sources had an anecdote about that, a VP at a major tech company.
Yes, he was watching the power to his GPU cluster get curtailed every evening as the sun set on the solar farm that was supposed to be powering it. And he had this realization that this whole scarcity mindset was an existential business risk.
So what did he do?
He bypassed the public utility completely, went out and drafted a contract directly with an SMR startup to build a dedicated nuclear microgrid for his data center.
And that's the pivot, that shift in thinking from just buying renewable credits to actually buying the reactor itself. That's the core takeaway here. Big tech is being forced to become its own power utility.
And they are pivoting hard toward nuclear to guarantee that supply.
Yeah.
The grid wall is forcing their hand.
This industrial necessity is fueling this dramatic resurgence for nuclear power. I mean, for decades in the West, it was seen as this Cold War relic.
Totally. Something to be decommissioned, not built. But since the early 2000s, and really accelerating now, you're seeing these technological breakthroughs that are making it viable again.
Driven almost entirely by the impending reality of AI's energy needs, they need scalable, zero carbon, and most importantly, always-on power.
And the key technology here, the thing that's completely changed the investment landscape and made nuclear attractive to Silicon Valley, is the Small Modular Reactor, or SMR.
And the even smaller microreactors. This is the paradigm shift, right?
It is. We're moving from these massive, bespoke, decades-long construction projects to a standardized, repeatable infrastructure component.
So give us some context. How small is a small modular reactor?
Well, typically they're defined as 300 megawatts or less.
Yeah.
So one SMR could power a few 100,000 homes or a very, very large data center campus. Microreactors are even smaller, maybe 1 to 20 megawatts.
And they solve the historical problems that just killed the industry, the massive upfront capital and the insane construction timelines.
Exactly. They solve it through modular, factory-fabricated construction.
Yeah.
Instead of building a reactor piece by piece on a remote site over 15 years.
You're basically building the parts on an assembly line.
Precisely. Standardized components, manufactured in a controlled factory environment, shipped to the site, and then assembled relatively quickly. You move from building a unique cathedral every time to a repeatable, predictable model that drives down cost and radically speeds up deployment.
And that speed is what's attracting the capital. I saw a number in one of the papers. Over 120 SMR designs are in active development right now globally.
It's a level of industrial vitality the nuclear sector hasn't seen since, the 1960s? It's a complete renaissance.
But safety, that's always the elephant in the room. And SMRs have a huge innovation here. Passive safety features.
This is maybe the most important part. It's a massive leap forward. It fundamentally reduces the risk and the complexity of the entire system.
So explain passive versus active safety.
Okay, so traditional large reactors rely on active systems. That means pumps, valves, redundant electrical grids, and ultimately human intervention to cool the reactor in an emergency. If those fail, you have a problem.
Passive safety, on the other hand,
relies on the laws of physics: gravity, natural circulation, convection. The design ensures that if all power is lost, natural forces take over to safely shut down and cool the reactor without any electricity or any human action needed. It fails safe.
And that inherent safety is critical. It lowers the risk profile, which should, and we'll get to this, it should simplify the regulatory process and ease public fears.
It should. Some of these new designs are orders of magnitude safer than the existing fleet of reactors.
Which is all aligning perfectly with the strategic needs of big tech. This is leading to a huge shift in how they finance energy. The whole investment thesis has changed.
It's a total pivot. They've gone from just buying cheap renewable energy credits, which, let's be honest, was often a form of greenwashing,
to becoming anchor customers and direct investors in the nuclear infrastructure itself.
And that's the move that de-risks the entire sector. When a company like Google or Amazon signs a 20-year power purchase agreement or takes a direct equity stake, they guarantee revenue for the developer.
Which turns a speculative tech project into a boring, bankable infrastructure greed investment.
And that brings in the big money. The institutional capital, the pension funds, they love that kind of long-term, predictable revenue.
We have some really concrete examples of this pivot. Google, Meta, Microsoft. They've pledged to triple their nuclear investments by 2050.
Meta's targets are just wild. They're aiming to generate 4 gigawatts of energy just for their own data centers. That's enough to power 3 million U.S. homes.
And Microsoft has been incredibly aggressive. They signed that PPA, that power purchase agreement, that could actually restart the 3 Mile Island Unit 1 reactor.
I mean, think about that. A tech company directly intervening to resurrect a mothballed nuclear plant just to secure its power supply. It's unprecedented.
Meanwhile, Amazon dropped $500 million into SMR development, backing companies like X-Energy.
And Google partnered with Kairos Power for a 50-megawatt supply in Tennessee and Alabama, using a next-generation reactor design.
This isn't just about diversifying their energy mix. This is a deliberate strategy. They are in pursuit of the sovereign electron.
Private, grid-independent nuclear power. But let me ask you, given this massive corporate push and how great SMRs sound on paper, can they really escape the political and local resistance that killed the last generation of nuclear builds? Is this sovereign compute actually achievable now, or is it still just a corporate fantasy?
That is the multi-trillion-dollar question, isn't it? And the sources are honest about it. The engineering is sound, the physics works, but the social license to operate is still fragile.
So what's different this time?
The sheer economic imperative, the absolute desperate need for power density. These tech companies are now using their immense capital and their lobbying power to force the issue, to overcome these permitting hurdles. They're betting that the economic boom from AI will be so great that it forces political acceptance.
And the relationship is totally symbiotic. It's not just that AI needs nuclear. Nuclear needs AI.
Yes, the AI accelerating nuclear loot. AI is being used to make nuclear power better, safer, and cheaper.
For example, in predictive maintenance, traditional maintenance is scheduled or it's reactive. Something breaks, you fix it.
But AI models can analyze thousands of sensor streams from a plant in real time, vibration, temperature, pressure, and they can spot these tiny anomalies that signal a potential failure is coming days or even weeks in advance.
And for an industry that is obsessed with safety and uptime, that is a revolutionary capability. Predictive maintenance can reduce reactor downtime by up to 50%.
And cut operating costs by 30%. That makes these plants much more economically competitive against other sources.
Then there's accelerated reactor design. Simulating the physics inside a reactor core is incredibly complex. It used to take months on a supercomputer.
Now AI simulations and optimization algorithms can slash those design timelines in half. That means we get these safer, more advanced Gen the Faith and SMR technologies to market much, much faster.
And finally, digital twins. They create these perfect, virtual, high-fidelity models of the physical reactor.
So you can test anything. You can run endless hypothetical accident scenarios, train a new generation of operators, all in a virtual environment without any risk to a live facility.
It's a powerful, self-reinforcing feedback loop. More energy from nuclear allows for more AI compute, which allows for faster scientific discovery, which in turn makes the energy extraction technology itself better.
Okay, so that brings us to the central contradiction of this whole deep dive. We have the technology in SMRs, we have the demand and the capital from big tech. But the sources all agree the main roadblock isn't tech or finance, it's bureaucracy.
That's right. It's what they call the cost disease. It's imposed almost entirely by regulatory inertia. And in the US, that means the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, the NRC.
The sources describe it as a regulatory tax that's choking the industry.
Well, look at the mechanism. One of the reports pointed out that the NRC literally charges applicants by the hour to review their applications.
So there's a perverse incentive to drag it out.
Exactly. The longer the review, the more fees the regulator collects. It directly throttles development.
And the historical data on this is just damning. Since the 1970s, the cost to build a nuclear plant in the US has skyrocketed, way beyond inflation or any increase in engineering complexity.
And it's almost all attributable to just layers and layers of new, often redundant regulatory requirements.
Yeah.
The approach has been described as insulating the public from the most remote, infinitesimal risks.
Which the sources call safetyism.
Safetyism. And it's done without any regard for the massive domestic and geopolitical costs of having no new energy capacity.
Let's get into the financial toll, because this cost disease isn't just a theory. You can see it in the data.
Okay, so the total reported regulatory liabilities for the entire U.S. nuclear industry top $15.7 billion.
Which breaks down to about $219 million per plant. That's money they have to hold on their books for long-term waste disposal and decommissioning. It's a huge cloud of financial uncertainty.
But that's the long-term stuff. What about the annual cost just to operate?
The number we found is staggering. The average nuclear plant faces an annual regulatory burden of nearly $60 million.
Just stop and think about that number. $60 million a year just to comply with paperwork and audits. That's before you buy fuel, pay your staff, or do any actual maintenance.
And a huge chunk of that is regulatory capital expenditure, or CapEx. That's the category that has just exploded.
The data shows that regulatory CapEx more than tripled between 2006 and 2015. That's an increase of over 340% per plant in under a decade.
By 2015, regulatory spending alone was 32% of total nuclear CapEx. A third of all investment capital was being spent just to satisfy the regulator.
I mean, what other industry could absorb a 3.4-fold increase in pure compliance cost and still remain profitable? It's impossible.
And it had a direct impact on profitability. The analysis we saw showed that for at least 6 U.S. plants, a conservative estimate of $30 million in annual regulatory costs was more than their entire profit margin.
They were losing money just by complying.
And for 15 plants in total, this regulatory tax was higher than the U.S. corporate income tax rate. No wonder so many perfectly good plants were shut down early.
And it's not slowing down. The number of NRC regulations increased by over 40% between 2005 and 2014. And there's a near-perfect correlation, a 0.9 coefficient, between that increase and rising operating costs.
The bureaucracy is literally strangling the industry's ability to compete.
And here's the deepest irony. The ultimate indictment of this safetyism. Most of this regulation is based on risk models from the 1970s that don't even apply to the new, inherently safer designs.
That is the crucial disconnect. These new Gen 3rd and Gen 4th reactors, especially the SMRs, are orders of magnitude safer.
Let's use the NuScale SMR as the example. Its estimated core damage frequency, that's the probability of a severe accident in a given year, is calculated to be 1 in 100 million.
1 in 100 million. And what does the NRC currently require for new reactors?
The NRC's requirement is a CDS of 1 in 10,000 per year. So the NuScale design is estimated to be 10,000 times safer than the regulator even requires.
10,000 times safer. And yet,
the design approval process still takes years and costs billions. The review for the US APWR reactor design took over 110 months, almost a decade. It's insanity.
So this political crisis, created by regulatory stagnation, has finally triggered a response from the very top. We're now seeing what the sources call the regulatory fix being driven by executive mandate.
Right. A recent executive order from May 2025 in our source material laid out this incredibly ambitious goal. Expand U.S. nuclear capacity from about 100 gigaLBU today to 400 gigaLBU by 2050.
A quadrupling of capacity. That's just not possible under the current regulatory system.
Which is why the order mandates fundamental reform at the NRC. It's about breaking that clock-punching bureaucracy. They're establishing fixed, hard deadlines.
Specifically, the NRC has to make a final decision on a new reactor license within 18 months, not 10 years. 18 months.
And they have to reconsider some of these outdated scientific models that impose irrational costs, like the linear no-threshold model for radiation.
Right. For anyone unfamiliar, LNT is the idea that any amount of radiation, no matter how small, even below natural background levels, carries a proportional risk of cancer.
Which forces you to build these incredibly expensive containment structures and safety systems to guard against negligible risks. The sources argue LNT is just bad science and should be replaced by a threshold model which recognizes the body can repair low-level damage.
And retiring LNT alone could dramatically cut construction costs.
Absolutely. The order also mandates creating expedited, standardized pathways for SMRs and microreactors. The idea is simple. Review a design once, then rapidly approve every identical copy that gets built.
And then there's the waste issue, the long-term failure of the federal government to actually take possession of spent nuclear fuel, as they were legally obligated to do.
That failure has left the private sector holding a potential liability of nearly $97 billion. It's a huge anchor on the industry.
And the consensus solution in the source material is to finally, politically, restart the Yucca Mountain licensing process in Nevada. Until that federal obligation is met, the industry is carrying this enormous unnecessary risk.
The political will to finally solve the Yucca Mountain problem is now seen as the ultimate litmus test. It shows whether the government is actually serious about that 400 gigaW goal.
Okay, let's shift focus to the global stage, because this isn't just a domestic issue. Nuclear power is rapidly becoming a new geopolitical front line.
Without a doubt. The race for AI supremacy isn't just about algorithms anymore. It's measured in joules. The nation that secures the density of uranium effectively masters the density of information.
And the U.S. government seems to finally recognize this. Reliable, high-density power for AI capabilities and critical defense facilities is now officially a core national security imperative.
Any vulnerability to the grid, a physical attack, a cyber threat, or just a simple brownout is now seen as a strategic risk that has to be eliminated from critical infrastructure.
This shift is spelled out explicitly in an executive order, 13299, deploying advanced nuclear reactor technologies for national security.
And the mandates in that order are incredibly aggressive and time-sensitive. The Department of Energy is directed to formally designate its AI data centers as critical defense facilities.
Which puts them on the same energy priority list as, what, missile defense systems?
Exactly. And the Department of Defense, through the Army, has to establish a nuclear energy program with the goal of operating a reactor on a domestic military base by September 30, 2028.
That is an incredibly tight deadline for a new nuclear deployment.
It's meant to be. The DOE itself has to get an advanced reactor running at one of its sites within 30 months of the order date. These are infrastructure sprints designed to show speed and commitment.
But to fuel all of this, you need a secure supply chain.
Which is why the DOE is also mandated to create a fuel bank. They have to release at least 20 metric tons of high-assay low-enriched uranium, or HALEU.
Let's quickly clarify HALEU. Standard reactor fuel is enriched to about 5% uranium-235. HALEU is enriched up to 20%.
And that higher density fuel is what many of these new, smaller, advanced reactors need to run efficiently for long periods without refueling.
So by creating a domestic HLEU bank, the U.S. is reducing its reliance on foreign suppliers.
Primarily Russia and China, who have dominated HLEU production. This is a critical piece of achieving true sovereign compute. You need independent power, but you also need independent fuel.
And the urgency of this whole strategy becomes crystal clear when you look at the China contrast.
Right. China's state-led, centrally planned nuclear strategy is the polar opposite of the market-driven, regulation-choked Western approach.
They just kept investing and building while the West basically stopped for 30 years.
And now they're positioning themselves as a global leader. They are pursuing strategic independence by diversifying their technology, most notably by operationalizing thorium reactors.
Thorium gives them a path to reduce their dependence on the global uranium market, which is largely dominated by Western-friendly nations. They can use their own domestic thorium reserves. It's a major geopolitical advantage.
And their export dominance strategy is aggressive. While U.S. firms are fighting through regulatory red tape to export an SMR, China is using its Belt and Road Initiative to sell its nuclear tech freely across the developing world.
And if China becomes the default provider of advanced nuclear energy to the rest of the world, that is a massive geopolitical shift. It's a direct challenge to U.S. hegemony.
Which is why the U.S. counterstrategy is so aggressive. The executive order mandates pursuing at least 20 new 123 agreements for peaceful nuclear cooperation.
These are the legal agreements that allow the U.S. to export its nuclear technology.
The goal is clear. Promote American nuclear exports, open new markets, and make sure the U.S. remains the partner of choice. The global power struggle is now literally about building advanced reactors to power exponential AI.
This really brings us back to the Kardashev scale. We're at about a 0.7 right now, trying to get to a Type I civilization.
And the sources argue that this energy limitation, the grid wall, the scarcity mindset, the regulatory text, this is our great filter.
It's the test. Do we have the political and technical will to break through energy scarcity and bureaucratic inertia, or do we just stagnate?
If we fail this test, the promise of AGI and everything that comes with it remained perpetually underpowered, trapped on the wrong side of the wall.
So if we try to connect all these threads, the big picture here seems undeniable.
I think so. The convergence of this exponential AI demand and rapid nuclear innovation is fundamentally changing what nuclear power is. It's not a slow utility asset anymore.
It's a high-growth technology investment, and it's an essential national security tool.
The momentum is just. It's clear. Big tech is now underwriting the future of nuclear power because it's the only way to secure their own digital future and achieve what the sources call energy superabundance.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? I think the challenge the source material presents is stark. It says that when you're up against the second law of thermodynamics, there really is no moderate position.
You either choose growth or you choose decay.
Exactly. We have to decide if we're going to let these outdated fears and bureaucratic procedures, this safetyism, restrict the energy we need for the next great leap in human intelligence.
And the sources are clear that the technology exists. SMRs, Jan-the-Feet designs, eventually fusion. These can solve energy scarcity. The roadblock is purely political and regulatory.
So the focus has to shift away from conservation and fear and towards rapid, efficient deployment. The alignment of commercial and national security interests seems to be the force that might finally dismantle that cost disease.
The ultimate question for you to consider then is this. We are standing at the precipice of achieving a Type I civilization. We're on the verge of being able to harness the full energy potential of our planet. If energy abundance is the ultimate measure of civilizational progress, what technical or social measure will be the first reliable indicator that we have truly transcended our current energy scarcity?